Hi everyone, delonewolf here. Welcome back to EVE Talk, your weekly look at the market in EVE Online, and it is FanFest week. Now we still have to go through the entirety of FanFest, but we did learn a lot about the Triglavian collective and what that content is going to be all about. It's quite controversial. I can understand why it's controversial. It's basically dungeons or maps from Path of Exile with an RNG loot system that can potentially get you some really, well, you could say overpowered items that will of course have crazy values. My first impressions on that, I'll quickly share them. I'm actually okay with it, but I am going to hold off judgment on whether or not I like it until I've done it a little bit. So the reason why I'm okay with it is because I do see this as basically the activity itself, more sand in the sandbox, just something else to do, another side activity. This doesn't impact Tech 1, Tech 2, Tech 3 production or any of the other existing mechanics all too much. It also doesn't add like a fourth, even more complex layer that would add all three previous layers in order to manage. So I like the fact that it's basically a horizontal expansion of the sandbox rather than a vertical one. And the concept of the dungeons themselves, well, we'll have to see if they can make them fun. It's a bit of a departure from the super hardcore. EVE Online is the big sandbox. It's definitely heading towards trying to cater to I would say a less hardcore crowd, try to get more people in, try to have more people find activities that they enjoy in other games in EVE Online as well. So we'll see. I need to run some of these dungeons, see how the RNG works out and things like that before I actually pass too much judgment on it. I'm okay with it. It's definitely not what I was expecting though when it comes to the Triglavian collective and the impact that they would have on EVE Online. But I find the concept itself quite interesting, and my plans for that, I am going to continue my cruiser exploration basically. You guys know that I've been looking into many different cruisers in order to do exploration. Well, this is perfect because this is cruiser solo content, so it's all about the cruisers, and I'm going to explore different ships, different setups now in order to prepare for the expansion into the Abyss that's coming late May. On the RNG loot front, I'm just going to keep my loot from now on, you know. Very expensive faction pieces, I don't really like them, but you can also get not so expensive faction pieces, and then if you can RNG those and potentially get some really good stuff out of it, I'm keeping my exploration loot from now on in order to try and RNG them to some close to god tier items, hopefully for my cruiser, and then we can keep going like that. The RNG itself, I personally, I can see the problems that people have with it on the unpredictability, but this is a sandbox, so adding more unpredictability, in my opinion, is a good thing. And we know from other games how massive of a hook this can be, how people do get engaged and basically obsessed with those RNG potential best in slots and things like that. So interesting route, not what I expected, but we'll see what it gives. We are here for the market, of course. As always, we are going to get started with some plex and stuff. It's at 4 minutes. Where's my pen? Here we go. Like that, and let's start with plex. Well, we are continuing the decline. The reason is obvious. I got an email that it's now 25% off or something like that on subscriptions. That is going to have an impact on the plex market as well. Personally, I would see this as a buy opportunity. I was not expecting an expansion in May, but I think that potentially, especially with that type of content, the aim is to draw in newer players. This could get lots of fresh blood in EVE Online if it's done successfully, if they can hype it up, and we can hype it up enough, if it's fun enough, then this could drive lots of demand from newer players in the game as well. Plex are currently selling for 2,980,000 ISK for the sellers, 850 for the buyers. That's in JITA itself. If we take a look at the player-owned trade hubs, it's 2.9 million ISK for a plex, below 3 million by quite a little bit. And the buyers are coming in at around 2,850. So this is definitely quite nice. I mean, 2.9 million for plex. If it wasn't for the fact that I already have a lot of plex, I would probably invest more in that. But right now, I also want some liquid ISK for some cruisers. So I'm not going to make too many plex investments, but if I didn't know what to do with my ISK, I would put it in plex at this point. Next up, we have the skill extractors. Yep, that no, we actually usually check the multiple pilot trading certificates that have begun their ascent. So it looks like the bottom will have been around 840 million ISK, selling now for 960 million ISK. That's quite a fast turnaround. Buyers up to 911 as well. So pretty obvious bottom formation here. To me, another indication that plex are bound to go back up a little bit, and that the general inflation in the market is definitely there. The big drawback for multiple pilot trading certificates, you can see that the volumes are starting to decrease. Availability on the market is quite great, so you may be stuck with your investments for a very long time. But you know, you could have bought those for less than 900 million ISK. Remember that in the future, when again we'll head for 1.3 billion or even 1.5 billion, that would have been a pretty damn good deal to grab some of those. On the skill extractor front, of course, very closely tied to plex themselves, heading for 330 million ISK. Sellers coming in at 325, buyers at 324. Of course, this is an item that you can buy directly from a CCP. So is this all that different from plex at this point? It has less use, so I wouldn't buy skill extractors when I could buy plex. But that's just my opinion on that. Next up, we have the large skill injectors that are continuing to stay flat despite the pressure from plex and extractors going down. So this again here is to me a strong indication that there is still very strong demand for skill points in the game itself. 804 million ISK, 787 million for the buyers, and another hint to me that this decrease in price in plex here is entirely driven by CCP sales, and that the potential is on the upside because of the multiple pilot trading certificates going up so sharply and those large skill injectors just staying flat despite the decreased price of plex and thus the extractor part of the skill injectors. Very strong demand for all of that stuff, because of the strong demand in skill points in general. The small skill injectors are basically normalizing after a bit of a dip here very quickly as well, 270 million ISK. Again, to me, that indication that the general interest is still very strong. 162 million for the sellers and 158.5 million pretty much for the buyers. Very narrow margin, and 162 is actually only around here on the chart. How many of those are? Well, there's actually quite a few of them, not all too many that recent. So the chart seems like it could be a little bit off. That's what this one's a little weird with so many sellers at 162, including some that have probably been here for a while. But maybe the chart is really station only, because in JITA itself you start to sell at 170 pretty much, which is around here. Well, no, that doesn't make too much sense either. Okay, a little bit of a weird chart on the small skill injectors, but definitely a little bit of a comeback on there. And then finally we have the daily alpha injectors that are going down in price, probably CCP sales once again. 58.5 million for the sellers, 54 million for the buyers. You know, if you see some dips like that, 54 million for the buyers might be worth it to try and grab a couple from the market. Wait for all the sale periods to cool down, watch the market go up a little bit, and then try to sell for a little bit of profit. But again, why invest in daily alpha injectors when you can invest in a plex chart like this? I don't know who would. Next up, we have our mineral market. That's gonna be at 9:30. There we go. And let's start with titanium, that is still managing to go back up a little bit in price, staying well above 5 ISK. I'm very happy to see that. We could have gone way lower here with these median daily prices going just below 5 ISK, but nice little rebound. Very happy to see this. 5.4 ISK for the sellers in Jita Station. Others are 9 and 10 jumps away. So yeah, we can say 5.4 ISK for the sellers. There is of course a decent amount of supply, hundreds of millions including and billions of units still coming to the market here. Buyers coming in at 514. Well, you know, only 2.1 billion unit sell order. Doesn't feel like it's all too crazy. You can see some pretty nice volumes here that drove the price up above 5 ISK. So I would say there is strong demand for titanium at the moment, and it's doing quite well. Unlike some of the other minerals like pyrite here, still languishing below 4.5 ISK. A little bit of volume increase. Look at the impact on the price, just absolutely nothing. We are still very close to the 1 year low prices, selling for 448 ISK, buyers coming in at 416. Pyrite basically equal to titanium, and then when you compare the yields from asteroids, this is pretty crazy. The good news, yeah, good news indeed. Mexalon together with titanium going up in price and heading back towards that 1 year high point, more than 80 ISK on the chart, which is really nice. 81.53 for the sellers, 74.17 for the buyers. It's a bit of a margin that's opening up, but on these volumes I would say there is strong demand. Nullsec is somehow getting into an even a higher gear when it comes to production, and that is when you see that they need more Mexalon, they need more titanium to be able to keep up with their full production cycles compared to what they mine locally apparently. So if you're mining in high-sec, definitely try to focus on your Mexalon and your titanium sources, because pyrite is bad and isogen is that is just every week. I think we're gonna stall. Every week we again reach another 1 year low point. This is pretty crazy. The chart is now playing with 30 ISK, 31.74 for the sellers, 31 ISK for the buyers, and no end in sight. Still 55 million here, 36 million here, 99 million here. Crazy low prices for isogen. Definitely the biggest casualty of all of these rebalancing and all of these changes to mining and the ore compositions and things like that. Next up here we have Noxium, also heading for a 1 year low again, playing with 300 ISK. We have been there before though, so this isn't completely out of the realm of possibilities. 305 ISK for the sellers, 290 for the buyers. But the big difference I would say with isogen is that you can see that the volumes are slowly going down. 306 ISK, you still have 36 million coming in, but here it's 1 million, 2 million. To me it feels like the closer we get to 300 on a sell price, the less people are willing to still put their Noxium up, and they just focus on other stuff. As a result, I think we can land at 300 on Noxium and then go back up a little bit, hopefully. For the nullsec minerals that are no longer nullsec minerals, here is Zydrine, also 1 year low point, staying above 600 ISK, stopping a little bit at the tail end, but selling for 640 ISK pretty much, buyers at 630, and the volumes here. This is different from before. You know, I have so many sell orders. These are all groups that have their own sources of Zydrine now in high-sec, in my opinion, or most of them. And there is a lot more competition now for getting rid of your Zydrine. As a result, you get this decrease in price ever since moon mining has been introduced. People were expecting that, and sources have increased because you also get Zydrine from moon mining now. But then in high-sec, you know, high-sec came in with 0.5 systems being able to mine Zydrine now. And just look at the increased, at the decreased prices, the increased supplies, and also to me very interestingly in chunks that I would attribute to like a weekly or a bi-weekly supply from a small corporation. 1.8 million units, 9 million, 5 million units here, 2.7 million units, a couple 100,000 coming in here, but all of them willing, you know, I'm gonna go a bit lower, I'm gonna go a bit lower, I wanna sell that Zydran, I wanna get that liquid ISK. Definitely a massive change in this market. Megasite, same thing, in fact still going down quite drastically, currently selling for 727 ISK, bars at 705, and here, you know, you get a little bit less Megasite compared to Zydran usually for the time you spend mining. And look at the numbers coming in here: 800,000, 800,000, 200,000, 3.5 million, 7 million. But this to me feels like, okay, that's a bit of a bigger corporation, that's a small corporation that's coming in with around 1 million units, deciding, okay, we're gonna try and sell that, grab our almost 1 billion unit, billion ISK. And you know, more, you have many more sell orders constantly competing with that price, and they've been driving that one down quite substantially. Morphite next, staying quite stable between 9 and 10,000 ISK, so still doing quite nicely. 9,700 for the sellers, 9,400 for the buyers. I would say, again, a bit too early, unfortunately, to start investing in Morphite. I'd love to see the chart hit 9,000 again, and thus buy orders well below that before I make a move. Next up, we have our PI segment at 1545. Like that. Let's go over these. I am actually not expecting too much, maybe even a pullback, which we're seeing here a little bit on the chart, at least for these advanced planetary materials. The reason is we know that there are structures in development, but nothing really all too concrete has been announced outside of the fact that I think it's in June Providence will be burning, because that's when the outposts will be replaced by the faction Citadel. So that could definitely bring some content to EVE Online as well. We'll see how that works out, but we know that basically the next phase are I would say structures that no longer need to catch up to the old POS infrastructure. So they could start with completely new stuff, new mechanics and new functionalities. And if I'm not mistaken, the roadmap is now getting closer to Upwell trying to disrupt space travel itself, which of course means gate construction by players. As a result, the broadcast nodes are now selling, first few coming in at 2.2 million, buyers at 2.1 million. If you look at that on the chart, that is definitely much more in line with the average prices, because we don't know of any new structures that are coming out in the near future. Construction blocks, after reaching a nice peak of more than 15,000 ISK, are giving ground a little bit. 13,800 for the sellers, 10,800 for the buyers. That's actually probably a pretty massive drop-off in demand here. Maybe, I suspect that you need construction blocks in order to create advanced PI materials, and so with the lack of announcements around structures, we are going down in price. Consumer electronics next could be the same thing, yeah, after a very strong few months at around 15,000 ISK, selling for 14,400, buyers at 13,500. I would say it's still above average, still a pretty decent price, but not at the 15k mark anymore. Coolants next, a little bit of a jump up to 9,000 and then a little bit back down. Not much to say here, of course, fuel related. 8,800 for the sellers, 8,500 for the buyers. Pretty cheap, and especially with no new structure on the horizon, it's hard to see more demand for fuel or anything like that that could drive the price up. Enriched uranium, very flat as well at 11,250. 11,500 for the sellers, 10,700 for the buyers. This is quite unremarkable, which is unfortunate. You know, fuel prices used to fluctuate quite wildly. You'd have impact on ice mining, ice blockades and things like that would eventually have their impact on PI as well. All of that does seem to have cooled down quite a little bit with the moon mining replacing POSes. Integrity response drones, the expected result here as well. We are falling back to 2.5 million. The regular price, 2.6 for the sellers, 2.56 for the buyers. Massive, well, pretty decent supply coming in here. This is to be expected. Mechanical parts, fuel related, very flat at 9,000 ISK. Nuclear reactors, this one is still pretty interesting for trades, of course. You can see here that we had quite a few opportunities to buy for around 90,000 ISK. then a sell opportunity at 130, and now we are back down. Where are the buyers at? 92,000 for the buyers, 98,000 for the sellers. I would say that, yeah, you could actually try that trade again on the nuclear reactors. You can see that whenever the chart is below 100,000, it's generally a good time to try to buy. And then with a bit of patience, 1, 2, 3, 4 sell opportunities that are pretty visible here. In fact, there's probably 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of them over the last year. You know, there's definitely something in these nuclear reactors that make them quite interesting. Next up, we've got the robotics. Okay, climbing a little bit above 100,000 ISK. Not bad for a fuel-related PI material. 101,000 for the sellers, 98,000 for the buyers. A bit above average, you could say, considering where the others are. Very stable at their low price ranges, so not bad. Self-harmonizing power cores, same thing here, bit of a pullback that happened quite a bit earlier than on the other advanced PI materials, but now we're basically stable at the regular price. 2.2 million for the sellers, 2.1 million for the buyers. Superconductors, these are still quite strong, so around 14,000 ISK on the chart, 13,600 for the sellers, just a couple of them. One big one, and 13,400 for the buyers. Definitely above average. You can still try to sell your superconductors, I would say. Test cultures went up in price, slowly going for 10,000 ISK. Not the clear-cut volatility that we would like to see, but definitely above average, I would say, at 9,500 for the sellers, 9,300 for the buyers. Let's put the entire chart to that. Yeah. Above 9,000, yeah, definitely above average. Producing and selling some test cultures does make sense to me at this point. It's unfortunate that you don't have the big spikes, of course, for actual investments, but what I do spot here is that from time to time the chart dips below 8,000 ISK. I would call those buy opportunities for, at this point, of course, the longer term, because you will need another structure announcement before you can actually cash in on that in any certain way. And then we've got the wetware mainframes that, well, to my surprise, are staying at a premium, selling for 2.7 million ISK, buyers at 2.5 million ISK. Still a bit more expensive than the other PI materials. Of course, considering what we're seeing in the others, we can expect a pullback in price at some point here as well. Next up, let's talk about some Tech 1 chips at 2150. There we go. Minerals still mostly down, so I don't think we'll see too many movements here. Any announcements at FanFest that might impact this market? Not really. Maybe some cruisers, right? You know, you could at first go with a Tech 1 cruiser in some of these new abyssal dungeons. I think people are just gonna start calling them dungeons, though, no matter what CCP tries to do. Yeah, I personally don't expect too much in the Tech 1 ship market section, which in some regards I think is okay for the game. Keep Tech 1 basically the base activity in EVE Online, mining, very low effort, pretty low risk type of activity, which produces your Tech 1 ships, which are your fodder, stuff that you really don't mind losing all that much. Very accessible for alpha clones and things like that as well. So maybe they specifically want to keep it cheap so that you know, that always remains a baseline in EVE Online where you can start from. So here's the Apocalypse, basically flat at the current price range, 145 million for the sellers, 129 for the buyers. The Caracal, nope, still below 9 million ISK here, sellers at 8.5 million, first one coming in, so are the buyers, so it's actually 9 million to 8.5 million, but obviously quite a bit of a dip. Catalyst next, staying below 1.25 million. Here is the Drake, you know, dipping down below 45 million. That's that pullback on most of those minerals. Currently selling for 44.5 million, 40 million for the buyers of Drakes. You know, back below the average of the entire year. And probably there's to stay. Ooh, that's It's very strange, also somewhat interesting. Here is the Fexor, the Ferox, excuse me, diving off a cliff, well below average, 1 year low point, less than 40 million ISK, 41 million for the sellers, 38 million for the buyers. Pretty crazy supply increase must have happened here all of a sudden, probably this volume spike, to drive the price back down like that. So if you want some really cheap Feroxes, you can definitely take a look at what's on the market at the moment. Hurricane, very flat, slow pressure as well at the tail end here, well below 45 million by now, 43.7 for the sellers. Yep, exactly. The Megatron staying okay at 150, but you can see that the increase in price, the recovery from the arms race event is over, and that we're not really going anywhere from here. 154, 155 million pretty much for the sellers. The Oracle also finally seeing that pressure from minerals come through here, heading for less than 70 million ISKs. Yep, look at that, 69.5 for the sellers, 65 million for the buyers. The Raven also here from February to now, you can see that there is a bit of pressure on, and we are back on an average price for a Raven, selling for 158, which is not bad compared to most of the others. It is of course a very popular PvE ship. The Retriever next, staying average to below average, 21 million, not much to say. Tempests, okay, bit of a sharp drop off that needed a bit of a recovery, but if we're at around 150, yeah, 152 for the sellers, 131 for the buyers. That's probably where we're going to stay for now. Thrasher continuing its slow descent as well after the end of Burn Jita, so less than 1 million ISK for a Thrasher now. The Tornado, same thing, right, as the Oracle, had a little bit of a good run, but now back below 65 million by quite a bit, 62.5 for the sellers. There's no stopping it. When minerals are this cheap, people can produce lots of stuff really cheaply and bring that to the market. The Tristan next, also again the slow descent here back to less than 500,000 ISK in general, 500,000 for the sellers. Venture, staying a bit above average from like half a year ago, but also I would say not going anywhere anytime soon. And then we've got the Vexor that again dips back below 10 million ISK, so the pressure is on. It's pretty obvious for the Tech 1 market. Next up we have the Tech 2 market at 26.30. There we go. Well, I find, well, no, actually, my first thought was maybe all this RNG stuff could displace some of the Tech 2 market, but we are checking the ships, of course, and here there is at the moment definitely no signs that they are going to allow these to be used on ships. So these Tech 2 ships here, the Ares is staying well above 30 million ISK, 31 for the sellers, 28 for the buyers. If this is starting to fossilize across the board, that we always do go back above 30 million ISK, then it does look like the second step down. You can clearly see here, right, the expansion, moon mining changes, more expensive Tech 2 materials. Right here you've got that first plateau at around 35 million ISK. After that we recovered a little bit, introduction of moon mining to ISAC as well, new plateau at around 30 million ISK. I personally thought we would maybe get back to 25 million, but it's starting to look like that may not happen. Here is the Cerberus, still playing with obviously 1 year high points at the moment, just a straight upward direction across the year from 200 million ISK or less than that, currently selling for 280 million ISK, yep, 280 on the chart, that's basically straight up. Here is the Claw next, yeah, actually heading back for 35 million ISK, sellers are coming in at 34 million, buyers are at 29 million ISK. Doesn't look good, so here we again you have that little plateau on the introduction. Here you have the second plateau, you could say, is playing around 30 million ISK, but no sign that we are going to go even lower at this point. Crow, even more bad news. We did dip to 27.5, but you can again tell that it's 32.5 million that we're going to hover at, selling for 34 million again. Next up here we've got the Crusader. Same thing, really no sign of another leg down here. In fact, another jump up to well above 30 million ISK. Now we're dipping probably a bit below that at 29 for the sellers, 26.5 for the buyers. But at the moment, I would say that if you see the chart come well below 30 million ISK, and I want to say 25 million, but it's probably a bit above that. That's when you're going to very likely be in a buy situation. The Heretic next staying, well, dipping back below 80 million ISK, but you can again see the 1-year trend and the very expensive situation we find ourselves in. Here is the Hound above 35 million ISK. So here, these are the dips that I'm talking about then, but yeah, I would like to see that dip to 25 million. Hell, I would like to see a chart hover around 25 million. It's just not going to happen. So now 28 million on the chart seems to be a buy opportunity. Let's say that you could have picked them up for 28 million. You're now selling them for 36.8 million. That's a nice bit of a profit right there. And in fact, that's in line with what happened right after the changes hit. The Ishtar heading for another 1-year high point at 300 million ISK. I would say the FanFest announcement might have something to do with that, of course. Tech 2 cruisers, no Tech 3 cruisers in the Abyssal Dungeons, so Tech 2 cruisers will probably become the best options because of their innate resists. The Manticore flat at 35 million. So yeah, first plateau, second plateau, no sign of a third one just yet. Nemesis also still well above 30 million, is 34 million for the sellers here. This one was really pronounced, and I think I called it, dipping down to 25 million on the chart and currently selling for 34 million. That is a nice trade. But I think we have to put up our alarms once the chart goes below 30 million. That's when you have to start looking for those buy opportunities. The Pontifex next, pretty flat at 75 million, still quite expensive and pretty low in volume, so I wouldn't be trading in that one. Purifier next, same thing here, actually up to 40 million ISK, 34 million for the sellers now. Just a couple of them, most of them at 38 million. Look at that, we play with 30 million. Sometimes you have an average day at like 27 million. So that's where you need to bounce on those buy opportunities, apparently, in the Tech 2 market at the moment. So I would say that it's looking less and less likely that another leg down and an average price of 25 million will be reached in the Tech 2 frigate market, because a jump back up to 35 million, buyers coming in at 31.5 and 34 million does mean that once we go below 30 million, it could start to be interesting. The Raptor next, same thing actually, taking off here from 30 million ISK, so we get that same type of chart now, selling for 37 million ISK. Here are the Sabres, quite expensive. Well, actually volumes are pretty decent in the Sabre, selling for 77 billion ISK, quite expensive. The Stiletto is not a frigate. Again, I would love to give you guys better news, but the pattern is definitely starting to show up here now. You had some buy opportunities when the chart showed 29 million as an average price, or a bit below that. Now we're out of Stilettos, and so you can go crazy, but you can definitely sell them quite easily for 35 to 40 million ISK, in my opinion. As you had a buy opportunity at 28, 27 million, maybe on the buyer side of things, when the chart was looking like that, but the takeoff here is back above the full average, and no sign of another leg down. Stork next, back down a bit, but again still quite expensive, of course, at 84 million ISK. And then finally we have the Taranis, which was my one hope, but you can now see that the chart reaching 25 million is basically a no-brainer buy opportunity, because we are selling Taranis again for 31 million ISK. Buyers are staying there, but you can see that I don't think it's going to sustainably go back down. So not a great week here for my personal expectations or hopes, you could say, for the Tech 2 market. But I would say that once you do see most of the frigates are up in price at the moment, so you could try to sell some if you have them lying around, if you took the gambles. But we are starting to see the pattern that for most of them, once the chart, once the price range on the chart of 30 million is broken, you can start to look for those buy opportunities. And your sell opportunities, they can go quite high. 37 million ISK, 34 million ISK. What was the Ares at? 31. That's not so great, but there are obviously, stealth bombers. I really like the stealth bombers. Actually, these charts are pretty good for trading. But you probably won't see an average price of 25 million in the Tech 2 frigate market anymore at this point. It's not really in my expectations anymore. Maybe it happens, but 0.5 systems have been going for quite a while. Zydra and Megasite have crashed down and will probably start forming a bottom at this point. So the supplies are there, including the supplies from Isaac and other places, and there is no sign that this is going to change, that these averages of 30 million are going to change. It's a bit unfortunate for me because it's very hard at this point to then tell you guys, yeah, I think this is pretty much a no-brain situation to try and buy some, because we are well below the average, but it's what we'll have to do with. We'll try to make it happen. Next up, the Tech 3 market at 35.40. 34.40. There we go. Let's take a look at these then. Here is the Confessor. After a lovely period of volatility from August to January, we are now under pressure, down in price to 35 million to 37 probably on average at the moment. Yeah, 39 for the sellers, 33.3 for the buyers. I would say that considering the entire chart, we are in an oversupply situation. This is your time to slowly stock up on some really cheap Confessors, in my opinion. A Nullsec War, like in Providence, will probably see lots of tactical destroyer action. I would definitely consider some purchases there, if you have the ISK, that is. Hecate, same thing, landing quite low at 35 million for the sellers, 32.5 for the buyers. I would definitely go for buy orders though. That's going to shave off a couple million ISK again, put you well below the chart, and put you in the best possible position for a sale when a Nullsec war does break out. Jackdaw, very popular as well in both PvE but also in the PvP Nullsec doctrines, selling for 38 million, bars 36 million. I'd love to see that one gone. Buying at 35 million for Jackdaws, that has to be a pretty good price. And then finally we also have the Svepel that is continuing down towards the 1 year low point of 30 million ISK, bars at 31 million ISK. Yeah, I would definitely say for the destroyers, we'll take a quick look at the volumes here as well. 134 of them, stopping anything all too drastic from happening unless a massive group buys a couple hundred of them. For the Jackdaw, you can clearly see that there's a couple of hundred of them available as well at current sell prices. Hecate, same thing, 300-400 of them in fact. And then the Confessor is not all too oversupplied, so that one looks to be the one that might be primed for an increase in price the most quickly and most sharply. Very interesting in my opinion. I still need to see exactly what I want to do with my ISK at the moment, but maybe buying like 4 or 5 of them, you know, try to put up a couple buy orders in each of them would make a lot of sense to me. Next up, the cruisers. Here is the Legion going up in price all of a sudden to 200 million ISK. Either this is a bit of a mistake because people are thinking, well, maybe we can use Tech 3 cruisers in that new content, but you can't, as far as I understand it. Or one thing that I saw during a talk with like lots of the developers about gameplay and changes to the game is that they're not too happy with the Loki being like the go-to Tech 3 cruiser at the moment. It's probably considered to be a little bit too powerful compared to the rest of them. They might do something about it, but they also said it's probably not for the short term. The Loki has always been one of the worst Tech 3 ships, and giving it its time in the sun might not be a bad thing, but over the course of some time they will probably address this situation where the Legion would cost like 150 million and then the Loki costs like 230 million, and then the Tengu and the Proteus are way cheaper as well. Loki selling for 230. Then let's take a look at the Proteus, which is very flat and selling for like 140 million. Is, you know, definitely lost all its popularity. And then finally we have the Tengu here that went up in price but is already selling back at 175 million ISK. So the Tech 3 market, love the destroyer market if you're looking for that investment. in the cruiser market, it's such a mixed picture, with the Loki being so clearly the winner, and the Legion as well, in fact the two most popular Tech 3 cruisers at the moment, that it's a bit hard to say exactly what's gonna happen in the Tech 3 cruiser market. And then finally, for the extra products at 39 minutes, we are going to take a look at lots of cruisers. As you guys probably know from my other videos, I am a massive fan of exploration. I do that mostly in cruisers, and the new content is geared towards solo players with cruisers. Cruisers only, as far as I understand it. Not destroyers, not tactical destroyers, nothing like that. It's gonna be Tech 1 cruisers, faction cruisers, and Tech 2 cruisers. So let's take a look at some of the more interesting ones. You know, Tech 1, I'll probably make some to see up how far you can push them in that type of content. But let's say that you want some of the best cruisers possible for that new content. What would we be looking at? First of all, of course, the faction cruisers themselves. So here's the Augurer Navy issue, pretty flat at 60 million ISK. Maybe another note, why am I going to look at a lot of these cruisers and why am I going to test out some crazy stuff? Well, they have some very specific environmental things that will impact like your cap, your shields, your resistances, your armor, sometimes positive, sometimes negative, and very importantly, there will be specific weapon systems to somewhat counter missiles and drones. So at the moment, I am personally thinking a Mark cruiser with lasers and a massive tank will probably be my first approach to that new type of content. So the Augurer Navy issue, let's take quick look maybe at some medium energy. Yeah, okay, and extra armor HP, you know, you could probably take a look at that. Caracal Navy issue, so that's missiles, passive shields, and really only missiles. I think you can get very unlucky with that combination in some of those dungeons, but we can also see it's very cheap at the moment. Less than 50 million is 1 year low point for the Caracal Navy issue is bound to be due to the faction warfare situation. Executor Navy issue, ooh, that's up in price quite sharply all of a sudden, yeah, in like the last week or so. Let's say 66.5 million, currently in 90 million. We're completely out of them. Quite interesting. What are the traits of this? Yeah, hybrid turrets could definitely be an option to look into as well. Omen Navy issue, something like that, actually pretty cheap. I'm quite surprised by that. It's going for 57 million ISK. And what's the trait here? Medium turret and optimal range. How many low slots? 7 low slots, 4 lasers. Not bad. Definitely a contender for a test there as well. Osprey Navy issue, very cheap at the moment as well. Is that missile systems? Well, that is a bit of a mixed bag. Actually, I kind of find that quite interesting because you could put in 2 turrets, a couple of launchers as well, and then does it also have drones? It also has drones capabilities up to medium. You know, that's quite interesting, just to give yourself different options compared to the environmental effects of those dungeons. And they're very cheap at the moment. I might buy myself an Osprey Navy issue. Side fleet issue, actually a bit more on the expensive side at the moment. The traits for this baby are projectile, rate of fire, light missile. Ooh, okay, mostly I would say potentially is that also a, you can choose on the maybe could still be interesting. Stabber fleet issue at 55 million, not going anywhere. It's not a missile weapon system, although it could have a missile launcher. Okay, interesting one as well. Okay, the Minmatar ones for like the crazy stuff, the mixed stuff could be interesting. Vexor Navy issue, extremely expensive at the moment, 90 million ISK. I think people just go for the Vexor Navy issue because it's such a good ratting ship and it's such a good kiting ship, but I personally don't think it's the best choice for that new type of content myself. On the pirate faction side, here is the Ashimu. What's that one about? Let's take a quick look at the traits here. Stasis webs, energy Nosferatu, and energy turrets. Medium energy turret damage, 100% roll. And what's the fitting then? 3 turrets, 6 low slots, 5 high slots, potentially lots of utility there as well. The Cinnabal, definitely one that I'm gonna try. Absolutely great ship, very fast, of course, being an Angel Cartel ship, and it does have missiles as a weapon system, so it shouldn't get impacted too much by a specific counter. Here, quite expensive compared to most of the other cruisers, 150 million, but I happen to have a couple lying around. The Ortrus next, heading for a 1-year low point. That's quite interesting, 185 million ISK. Unfortunately, I think the Ortrus is, of course, missile bonus. Does it have drones? It does have drones as well, but will that be the best choice? I do think that CCP knows very well that stuff like the Gila, like the Ortrus, like some of the other Caldari Tech 2 cruisers are just insanely good exploration ships for all of those combat sites, and I think that is very specifically why they'll put some very nasty traps in there for these ships. The Phantasm I find quite interesting, 120 million as well. It's of course a laser-based platform. With a couple of drones just to get rid of the small stuff, and the fittings on that 6-5 low power slots. Okay, not too much on the tank, but the 6 medium slots can be interesting. Yeah, could be cool. The Stratios, of course, I think is going to be one of those go-to ships as well for that content. Is it going up in price? Currently selling for 203 million ISK. If we look at this chart, it's definitely up in price all of a sudden. Same thing with the volumes. I wouldn't be surprised if people are stacking up on some Stratios for that type of content. Why as well? You are somewhat more vulnerable on the exit, of course, where someone can just find it and they know that you'll have to pop out, and the Stratos is covered up, so you might have a chance to cloak your way out of that as well. The Gila actually down in price a little bit, but quite expensive at 200 million ISK. We all know the Gila, I don't think I have to go over that one too much. Here is the Vigilant, going quite expensive, 200 million ISK as well. And what are its traits? So the fitting, 6 low slots, not bad if you want a tank, 5 turret slots, and it has stasis web bonus, hybrid turret bonus, 75% in fact. That's just straight up the roll bonus, and then increased medium hybrid turret fall off range. Okay, could be quite interesting for a platform as well. Let's also take a look at some of these advanced cruisers. Obviously the flag cruisers, you're not going to use the monitor in there because it doesn't have any weapons. On the heavy assault cruiser side, I am personally quite interested in the MR ships, but the Zealot I think is now a missile platform, so I wouldn't take that, and then it is the Zealot for me. 233 million ISK for a Zealot feels quite doable. Price wise though, look at that, I may not be the only one who's thinking stuff like a Zealot in those sites might be good, because we are at a 1 year high price point. And let's take a quick look at the fitting of this. 7 low slots with the armor tank here already quite strong across the board. You can get an insane tank on the Zealot, I think. I think I'm looking at a Zealot at first for trying to get as comfortable as possible in one of those dungeons. Could be interesting. The Caldari ones, we know the Cerberus and the Eagle Shield. Ooh, the Eagle, good god. 1 year high point going for 400 million ISK at the moment. Cerberus, not so bad, but good god, the Eagle is costing much. It also has drones, and that should be... Oh, and hybrid turrets. I don't know, is this because of the announcement? You know, if you want a Caldari ship, then that is going to have a really good passive shield tank, but is not going to get hit by those specific missile counters. Here is the Eagle, of course. Hybrid turret with some drones, and then on the fitting side 6 medium slots. And again, if you look at the shields resists, is that this 80, 70, 50, just one gap to plug with a couple of slots, and you're good to go. Can be a very strong choice as well. Then we've got the Demos, that is at a regular price, and the Ishtar is currently at a high price point. The Demos, you know, Galanti ships with hybrid turrets, it's all about getting in your face. I'm not really sure if that's going to be the best choice. It takes away your kiting option basically. And then we've got the Munin. You guys already saw the Munin in some of my tests with that ship on exploration. It's going back down in price a little bit, 275 million ISK, and it does have an insane tank as well, with potentially you could try artilleries, autocannons, but it has a nice optimal range bonus as well. So this can be a pretty good one too. And then we finally have the Vagabond as well. That's selling for 283 million ISK, and that is projectile turrets fitting wise 6 high slots. Not so I'm not sure if you can get enough tank on the Vagabond, so I'm not sure if that one will ever be popular. It is quite expensive at the moment, although not at a 1-year high point either. So I think these will be the categories to look at when it comes to getting ready for that new type of content. Take 2 cruisers, unfortunately very expensive of course since the changes to moon mining, but some of the interesting ones to me at least, like the Zealot here. Yeah, the Zealot actually did just go up in price quite substantially, but you know, 250 to 300 million for the hull is I think what you're looking at. If you want the cheaper option, then you can of course take a look at some of these pirate faction cruisers at the moment. If you want that very specifically, the Ortress is at a 1-year low point. Maybe for a longer term investment that could be interesting, but I would not really look into that for that new type of content right off the bat because of those specific counters. I'd be more interested in something like a Cinnabal, like a Phantasm, like a Stradios, which can have different weapon systems, rather than the usual suspects. I would go alternative routes in my preparation myself. Quite a few very affordable options, and if you want to bling it out a little bit, head for those advanced cruisers as well. That's going to be it for this week's Eve Talk, guys. I look forward to more information on FanFest, getting on CC, taking a look at all of that new content, and finally giving those abyssal dungeons a pretty good run. Really see if I can enjoy them, what type of upgrades you can get for that, what kind of strategies you can encounter or employ, all of that good stuff. I definitely see still lots of potential for video content from all of that. 15-minute chunks is just about perfect, so we will see. Interesting future. Definitely not what I was expecting, so let's hope it all works out. Thank you very much for watching, guys. I'll see you all next time.